my first match was against a guy from Malta, and recently I sustained a knee injury, so I wanted to get in there and just get in and get out before I was able to. So I wasn't able to be submitted by just standing there, and my knee was hurting really bad. So I went in. I did something called the Victor Roll. It's something I learned from my coach, Riley Bodycomb, and it's a roll where you flip underneath the guy, and then I latched onto his ankle, then I ankle locked him. And then in my final match against a guy from Japan, he ended up sitting down on me, and then I ended up grabbing another ankle lock and finishing that as well. Hey, this is Denny Lenormand. You're listening to No Holds Barred with Eddie Goldman.
And Defense Soap, an effective, deep penetrating body soap with natural antifungal, antiviral, and antibacterial soap ingredients. Defense Soap is the best cleansing body soap for men and women athletes who are involved in contact sports such as MMA, wrestling, grappling, jiu-jitsu, and judo to help their antifungal, anti-ringworm, anti-jock itch strategy. Check out their website at defensesoap.com. Hello, everyone around the world. Welcome back. This is Eddie Goldman, No Holds Barred. At the just completed first World Championships for Combat Wrestling in Varna, Bulgaria, the American team had 5 wrestlers. They all did very well. They all got medals, but only one of them got a gold medal. That was Denny Lenormand at 68 kilos. We have him on the line with us. He's going to talk about this competition, and welcome to No Holds Barred, and congratulations.
Hey, thanks, Eddie.
Tell us about.
So yeah, go ahead.
Well, tell us about the matches, because you won your matches by submissions, and you really impressed a lot of people with doing that.
Oh, yeah. So my first match was against a guy from Malta, and recently I sustained a knee injury, so I wanted to get in there and just get in and get out before, like, I was able to, so I wasn't able to be submitted by just, like, standing there and my knee was hurting really bad. So I went in, I did something called the Victor Roll. It's something I learned from my coach, Riley Bodycomb, and it's a roll where you flip underneath the guy, and then I latched onto his ankle, then I ankle locked him. And then in my final match against a guy from Japan, he ended up sitting down on me, and then I ended up grabbing another ankle lock and finishing that as well.
So you were able in both matches to get submissions and get the medal as well. Tell us a little bit about your background, because a lot of these sound like Sambo moves, very Sambo influenced. Yes, that's correct. My coach is Riley Bodycomb, and his coach is Steve, who runs New York Combat Sambo. And I'm heavily influenced by their teachings and like leg lock entries and dynamic entries, which are utilized in Sambo. So my favorite move is a Victor Roll, and that's generally how I win my matches. So yeah, my background is heavily Sambo based. I do a lot of no-gi grappling, or we call it submission wrestling. And also I have a background in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Then the purple belt you got with the gi, and you've also been doing the no-gi grappling without the gi. I know you've won a number of tournaments in Sambo and all that. Tell us what you think of combat wrestling, because combat wrestling is set up to really appeal to people and who have techniques from all these different styles, including freestyle and Greco and folk style wrestling and American folk style and other styles as well. Tell us about your experience under these rules, which are different from all these others.
Yeah, so the rules are like allow a lot of like high velocity throws and different things like that, like over the hip throws and a lot of these cool wrestling things. And it's heavily influences the stand-up. So the limit to ground time and the work time that you can have is given by the ref's discretion. So you could hit the ground and then be stood up immediately, which is very similar to sports Sambo. You hit the ground, if you're not working, say, for a submission or a pin, then you're stood right back up. And as opposed to, say, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or like no-gi grappling, you're allowed to stay on the ground for a long time. And the point system varies like way different. It's basically more thrill-oriented, gives you a higher reward. But for my game, I was able to utilize my dynamic entries and submission knowledge to obtain the win. And I didn't have to train very differently for this type of tournament because like Riley has indicated that his influence was a lot of the combat wrestling that's been done in the past in Japan. So he kind of like molded his students into learning like this method of, like these flashy moves that win and, that are heavily influenced by this combat wrestling that was done in Japan.
Based on what your experience and what you saw, which style or styles best prepare you for combat wrestling until, at some point, hopefully there's going to be a lot more tournaments, a lot more specific training in combat wrestling. But right now, it's like the very early days of MMA. People are coming from something else to it. Which styles do you think are the most helpful for combat wrestling?
Stylistically, I think, that's very hard to say because a lot of other guys were doing very well too. For
not
me,
just one, not one. I mean, it could
oh
be
yeah. So I mean, we train, we cross train very much. So it's like I do, training Sambo that helped me with stand up, training wrestling that also helped me with stand up, and then dynamic entries and different things like that were also very helpful. So I think combat wrestling kind of tries to combine mostly everything that a grappler knows with submissions and their grappling. So I don't think necessarily one style proved to be the best. It was a lot of people cross training and different backgrounds were helping. Specifically me, that cross training definitely was my main tool.
Yeah, I was talking earlier when I interviewed Steve Kepfer on this, that it seems as that this, like many other sports really, they're going to be people with one style or another developing their own styles, even though they'll have the same rules. And I just gave as an example, say in boxing, you have somebody like Floyd Mayweather, who's known really more as a defensive specialist and very fast. And then, of course, you had somebody like Mike Tyson, known as the big puncher and brawler. And then there are many other sports, not even combat sports, you could point to that. In baseball, there are people that are singles hitters and there are home run hitters and all that. It just seems that this is going to be a similar thing in combat wrestling.
I mean, I can agree with that, but people are gonna. It's a game, so people are gonna play the rules how they see, and some people play the point game, some people play the submission game, and like for example, guys that I've noticed that had a heavily influenced wrestling background were playing the point game more than, say, myself, who I was only worried about obtaining the submission only. So, like, I understood the rules and how the points were working, so I was able to utilize that to my advantage and just go for submission.
Now, I don't know if the video is up. I know the videos are coming. I don't know if the video of your matches are up at this point, but based on what you saw, and again, I don't know how much of the other matches that you had a chance to see, give us your impressions of this style from a spectator's standpoint. Obviously, people that have an interest in wrestling and grappling and combat sports and that sort of thing, but you talked about dynamic entries. How dynamic does this look? Because one of the criticisms of BJJ and of no-gi grappling and of other styles of wrestling is that then for most people they're not that exciting to watch. How does combat wrestling in its first world championship stack up?
I believe they stack up very well. For example, the stand-up is one of the most interesting things for me to watch whenever I'm watching a tournament. If two guys tangle up and they hit the ground and they're just, it's like a slow progression. It's not that interesting for me. And I can't even imagine for like a non-grappler or a spectator that has minimal grappling knowledge. So combat wrestling, there were some high impact throws, guys wrestling around, pushing each other off the mat. So things like that are exciting for people to watch. And I think the rules dictate how the match is going to turn out. With limited ground time, people are getting to work faster than, say, in a no-gi environment or a gi jiu-jitsu environment. So, yeah, I believe that this tournament was very exciting to watch. And whenever the videos come out, people will see, Eastern European countries or more wrestling oriented. And I would say, guys from the United States were influenced by submissions and, various takedowns and things like that.
Now, I was reading, you also have a background in breakdancing. Tell us about that. How you got into that, and if you're still doing it, and what connection that would have with all these styles of wrestling and grappling.
So yeah, I started breakdancing way back in say 2000, and then I started grappling in 2010. And the way those influence my movements are my hips are, I can find my hips when I'm being thrown sometimes. So for dynamic entries, the movement relates very well to, say, breakdancing, like windmills are very similar to how you would enter a Victor roll and stuff like that. A flying scissor is very similar to flare from gymnastics. So I was able to adapt these movements to my grappling, and it's been very helpful, in addition to flexibility and just basic agility.
There have been other people in wrestling with grappling, with gymnastics backgrounds. I mean, one obvious example is a great Mark Schultz, did gymnastics, and of course was an Olympic, world, national champion, and all of the accolades that he has. So even though they're not combat sports, they seem to help in certain ways prepare you for when you get involved in these styles of wrestling and grappling.
Yeah, I agree with that heavily. There are a few guys now that are breakdancers from 10th Planet, and they're amazing. And just the flexibility, the body awareness that it provides for you is, immensely helpful for, newer grapplers to, it goes back to the idea of cross-training. You can cross-train in, not necessarily a combat sport and still do well in grappling.
Now, are you still doing that, the breakdancing, either professionally or otherwise?
I'm currently not doing it professionally. Occasionally I will do moves and different things like that. But like I said, I recently sustained a knee injury, so that's one of my main concerns right now for breakdancing. Exactly.
Now, you got the injury, but you're still able to go over to Bulgaria and get the 2 submissions. What's the state of it right now? You have to take time off, or have you figured all that out?
So I'm still teaching submission wrestling, and I'm not sure if I have to take too much time off. I think it's just a sprain, but you know how these things go. You have to go get an MRI and all these things like that. So, competing while I was injured was almost like a no-brainer for me. I felt like it was something that I had to do. And, talking to Riley, he, helped me through it and stuff like that. It was very helpful. He kept hinting to, John McClane from Die Hard. Said, what would John McClane do? So it was very, very helpful coaching.
Another thing that I found interesting in your background is that in college you studied physics, and how does that work in? Are there any things you learn, a certain scientific approach to wrestling and grappling? Because they obviously involve the physics of the human body.
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of leverage. You need to, if something's not working, you're like, why is this not working? How can I leverage the person a little bit better? Also, the research aspect. So you need to research different moves and how to do them and stuff like that for what you want to achieve. So having these different aspects, so understanding how the body works and also researching your field is something that you can continually need to do to keep up with, different trends and how things are working, or different moves are working out for people.
Now, what are you actually doing full time now? Because you talked about training and teaching in that. How much of your time are you able to devote to that?
For the most part, I'm just teaching right now. So I teach a few days a week, and I devote a lot of my time to trying to gain better technique, so I can teach other people, other students, properly and stuff like that. But yeah, so Riley just moved away, and it kind of left a hole here. So I'm trying to not necessarily fill the hole, but come up with some stuff that's going to be helpful for students around here in New Orleans.
Where are you doing the teaching at, or the grappling?
So I teach at NOLA BJJ here.
Okay. Now, that name is a BJJ school, but we've seen a lot of places that are called BJJ schools that not only have no-gi grappling, which is really, a lot of people say BJJ without the gi, but how much is it incorporating all these other styles now, combat wrestling and other, freestyle, folk style, Greco, all those types of things, Sambo, judo? How much is that? How much leeway do you have at a BJJ place?
So NOLA BJJ is very open to different styles. We had Sambo classes, we have wrestling classes, and we also have no-gi. And so at this school, we allow just about everything from, we do heel hooks and stuff like that safely. And it's a very open jiu-jitsu school, and they kind of nurture that type of behavior.
Do you think the sense is changing from your involvement in jiu-jitsu and grappling away from styles, that my style is the only style, my techniques are the only ones that are good? It just seems there's a lot more open attitude among a whole lot of different people to different rule sets, different styles, and different techniques than there was a number of years ago.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it is changing. With rules for tournaments are tending to change, and there was just recently a grappling tournament here in New Orleans that allowed reaping in the gi. So that's an indication of people are kind of coming around to the idea like certain things are not necessarily as dangerous as they once thought, and I can't agree with it more. That I think it's changing. You're seeing leg locks a lot more now than you did a few years ago.
How is the grappling scene in the New Orleans area? And also, we just recently had the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. How much did that affect it, and how much has it rebounded from the general devastation and problems that were caused there?
So I wasn't grappling before Hurricane Katrina, so I started grappling in 2010, but I can say that my school's emblem is a big X with the letters NOLA inside of it, and that's from Hurricane Katrina, and it's a very powerful seeming type of picture for me and for a lot of locals, but the scene here is doing very well. There are a lot of schools around here. In fact, it's probably saturated with schools in Louisiana, and there are tons of grapplers, and the scene is flourishing.
It's interesting. And how was, you just started, you said, in 2010.
That's correct.
how has it grown in those 5 years, or how has it developed in those 5 years?
It's grown pretty big. So when I started in 2010, the main schools were there was a Gracie Baja that's now Gracie United Schools, and there are a bunch around Louisiana, and there are 4 locations, I believe, of Sambo and BJJ, and there are a few other different schools like BJJ Revolution around here, and then there's schools in Homa, and yeah, so the scene's been growing ever since I started.
It's interesting. And what about competitions in that area? Because you hear of local competitions. You usually don't hear of the really big competitions going to New Orleans too much.
No, there's a bunch of local competitions which are great. The venue is usually at UNO, and there's like 5 or 6 that's held over there a year, and then AGF comes down here, and I believe Naga is coming down here in August. I mean, not August, in October for the first time. So that's going to be interesting to have that down here.
Now, do you have other competitions planned? Because I know combat wrestling in the United States, Steve Keffer said there are plans to have a bunch of tournaments for next year. Probably not. It seemed unlikely there was going to be anything in combat wrestling for the rest of 2015. But because of the knee, you taking time off, or do you plan, or are you looking at some competitions to be in?
Yeah, so I definitely want to still compete, but I have to take care of this knee injury first. Depending on how long this takes to heal determines when the next time I compete.
Okay. Do you anticipate having specific classes or teaching specific classes under the combat wrestling rule set and adding that so you get more people to compete in this?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I love promoting competing in multiple sports. So what I like to do and kind of what's been ingrained in me is that train for everything all the time, and then whenever a tournament's coming up, train rule specific for that.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, since you see so many people going back and forth to all these different events, and even in catch wrestling too, where you have people from a similar situation where people coming in from different backgrounds and people competing in that, influenced by what their backgrounds are, but they compete under that rule set. And then you have some people that are principally training in catch wrestling, but even those people have come from one style or, one background or another. So there's some parallels there.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I just like, whenever I'm training, to be able to have an open mind to what we're doing, and then restrain myself later if I need to. Say if I'm training for sports sambo, you can be a little bit more reckless with your takedown because you can't get choked, and different things. And also combat wrestling, in this particular tournament, there was no standing submissions, so you can't be guillotined while standing. So you have to train for those minute details for sport-specific things.
Do you anticipate, is this going to have any effect on your belt ranking in BJJ because you won the worlds in this under these rules?
I'm not sure because it's maybe not. I train jiu-jitsu probably less than half that I do, say, without the uniform on, or sambo. So I don't think it's going to affect my jiu-jitsu rank. And in addition, I haven't competed in jiu-jitsu in quite a while.
Okay. So what are your, when the issue of the knee gets straightened out, which kind of tournaments, under what rules are you mainly looking at in terms of getting back? Other than obviously next year they're going to have another World Team Trials in combat wrestling. I don't know if you have to go through that again. I'm not sure what was set up since you won